The mysterious signal. It was an ordinary day at the Earth Defense Command, the place where the world's top scientists and military minds monitored space. The sky was clear, the stars glittering like diamonds in the vast blackness of space. Little did they know, something unusual was about to change their entire world. At the control center, Lieutenant Grace Walker, a seasoned officer, was going over routine reports. Everything seemed normal. The hum of the computers filled the room, and the soft glow of the screens reflected off the walls. Suddenly, a strange sound interrupted the peaceful atmosphere. A faint, static-filled transmission. Could this be a glitch? Lieutenant Walker asked herself, rubbing her tired eyes. She adjusted the frequency on her console, hoping to clear up the interference. But the static only grew louder. And then, a clear, unmistakable signal emerged. The message wasn't in any language they knew, but it was definitely a call for help. Emergency distress signal, she muttered under her breath. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, and the team scrambled to decode the transmission. A team of experts was called in immediately. They worked quickly, their fingers flying across consoles and monitors. The first few lines were garbled, but slowly, the message started to make sense. We are dying. The enemy, too strong. Please, Earth, aid us. The message was short, but it was enough. Whoever had sent it was in desperate need of help. The transmission carried a sense of fear, the kind of fear that only comes when there's no hope left. Grace could feel the chill in the air. There was something urgent about this signal. It wasn't like the usual communication they received from deep space probes. This one had a human-like quality to it, as if someone was reaching out from the depths of space, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would hear them. The room fell silent. The usual buzz of activity stopped. Grace's mind raced. Who could this be? She wondered. And why us? The team worked tirelessly to trace the origin of the message. The coordinates were distant, far beyond the borders of the solar system. It wasn't just a routine distress call. It was a plea for help from a civilization far older and more advanced than humanity. Grace's heart beat faster. She had never been faced with something so unknown. The signal is coming from the Andromeda Galaxy, said Dr. Philip Carter, one of the leading scientists at the station. His voice trembled as he spoke. Andromeda was a vast and mysterious galaxy, home to billions of stars and possibly billions of planets, but it was so far away that humanity had never been able to explore it fully. It was a place of legends, stories whispered among the stars. But now, someone from that distant place was reaching out, and it was not just a casual message. Grace could feel the weight of the situation. "Can you confirm the source?" she asked, her voice steady despite the confusion swirling in her mind. Dr. Carter nodded, his hands shaking as he adjusted the instruments. "It's coming from a planet called Zethra. It's in the middle of a star system that's been dead for centuries, but there's still a faint signal. It's strange, Lieutenant, almost like it's been sent on purpose." "Purpose?" Grace repeated, trying to understand. "What do you mean?" "The signal's not random," Carter explained. "It's too deliberate. Whoever sent it knows what they're doing. This isn't a simple distress call. They want us to hear it. They want Earth to respond." A chill ran down Grace's spine. Why Earth? Why were they reaching out to them? Could they have been trying to contact other civilizations, only to find Earth's frequency? Or was there something more to it? The questions piled up in her mind, but there were no answers, only more uncertainty. She knew one thing for sure. The situation was dire. The message mentioned an enemy, a powerful force. What kind of enemy could be so strong that it could threaten a civilization that was advanced enough to communicate across galaxies? As the team continued to analyze the signal, Grace called in the higher-ups. The response came swiftly. Within moments, Earth's top military commanders, scientists, and world leaders were briefed about the situation. General Alexander Moore, the head of Earth's defense forces, was the first to speak. This could be a trap. We can't just respond blindly. If there's a threat out there, we need to be prepared." The room buzzed with tension. There were many who were skeptical. After all, humanity had received strange signals before, but none had led to anything significant. Still, there was something different about this one. The tone of the message, the desperation, and the fact that it was coming from a galaxy so far away. It couldn't be ignored. "We need to act fast," General Moore continued. "But we'll do it carefully. I want the best minds on this, and I want to make sure we don't walk into a trap. We'll send a small probe to investigate, and if the threat is real, we'll be ready." Grace stood there, listening to the conversations around her. Her mind was racing, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something bigger, something that would change everything. Earth had never faced a threat like this before, and soon they would learn the true meaning of the SOS. As the meeting wrapped up, Grace felt the weight of the decision ahead. The fate of Earth, and perhaps many other civilizations, rested on what they would do next. The signal had been received. The clock was ticking. Now Earth had to decide. Would they answer the call? And if they did, would they be prepared for what awaited them? The mystery deepened, the ancient warning. As the hours passed, the Earth Defense Command worked nonstop, analyzing every aspect of the mysterious transmission. The message had stirred a sense of urgency in every corner of the world. Governments and military leaders scrambled to mobilize their forces, while scientists continued their deep dive into the encrypted data. The more they uncovered, the more alarming it became. Lieutenant Grace Walker, still at the command center, stared at the monitors as new information began to filter in. The message, it turned out, wasn't just a plea for help. It was a warning from an alien race that had been on the brink of extinction for centuries. The civilization, known as the Zethrans, had been locked in a battle for survival against an unknown, terrifying enemy, and the transmission had been sent as a last-ditch effort to save themselves, and possibly Earth. Zethra. They're calling it their homeworld, Dr. Philip Carter said, his voice trembling as he pored over the decoded data. They mention a relentless force, something far more powerful than their technology or military. It's terrifying. Grace felt a chill run down her spine. A force that could bring an entire civilization to its knees, with technology and power beyond Earth's understanding. What kind of enemy were they up against? The message itself was filled with fragmented information. There was no clear explanation of who or what the enemy was, but the Zethrans described their invaders as hunters, relentless and merciless. They spoke of entire worlds falling one by one, wiped out without warning or mercy, their people slaughtered or driven into hiding. There was a fear in their words, unlike anything Grace had seen before. They were pleading not just for help, but for Earth to prepare for what was coming. This enemy doesn't just destroy, they wipe out entire histories. Dr. Carter continued. They consume knowledge, technology, and cultures, leaving nothing behind but death. Grace's heart raced as she processed the weight of the situation. The Zethrans had been monitoring Earth for some time, carefully tracking humanity's rise to power, and now they needed help. Desperate help. And that left Grace wondering, why Earth? Why was this ancient civilization, clearly advanced beyond human technology, reaching out to them? The deeper they dug into the message, the more ominous it became. It wasn't just a cry for help. It was an invitation to join an intergalactic war. The Zethrans had realized something that Earth's military and leaders hadn't yet fully grasped. The hunters were coming for Earth next. The Zethrans weren't asking Earth to fight their battle. They were warning humanity that their very existence was in jeopardy. This enemy wasn't just looking to conquer. They were looking to erase civilizations from the very fabric of space-time. Grace felt a knot tighten in her stomach. What if they're right? What if we're not ready for this? She wondered aloud. General Moore, now fully briefed on the situation, had gathered the top commanders and strategists. The mood in the room was tense. It was one thing to defend Earth from typical threats, but this was something entirely new. No one knew exactly what the Zethrans were facing, and the unknowns were terrifying. "We can't afford to take this lightly," General Moore said, his voice grim. "This enemy has already wiped out the Zethrans' allies and is moving towards Earth. We have to prepare for war, but we also have to learn everything we can about this threat." The Earth Defense Command was quick to react. The military was put on high alert, and top scientists were assigned to research alien defense technology, even as they continued decoding the Zethran message. Yet, despite their efforts, many of the details about the hunters remained unclear. The transmission had only provided pieces of a puzzle, and the rest was left to guesswork. Back at the command center, Grace was staring at a map of the galaxy. She traced her finger along the coordinates from where the transmission had originated, Zethra. The map showed a vast, uncharted region of space, far beyond the known boundaries of the Milky Way. To make matters worse, it was located in a sector with no major stars nearby, surrounded by empty space and cosmic anomalies. Why send a message from here? Grace thought aloud. Why not a closer place? It doesn't make sense. Dr. Carter, who had been silent for a few moments, finally spoke up. What if they were already on the run? They couldn't risk the message being intercepted, not by the hunters. Grace's mind raced. The Zethrans had been running, hiding, surviving. They had sent the SOS not just to Earth, but to anyone who would listen. And now, Earth had to decide. Would they take the Zethrans seriously? Could they afford to ignore this ancient warning and risk the same fate as those who had already fallen? The more Grace thought about it, the more she realized that Earth's greatest strength might be its unpredictability. The Zethrans had lost their fight. Perhaps they had grown too dependent on their advanced technology. But Earth had something the Zethrans might have forgotten in their long war: humanity's resilience, resourcefulness, and a willingness to fight for survival against impossible odds. Maybe that's why they're reaching out to us, Grace murmured to herself. Maybe they think we can do what they couldn't, but are we ready for what's coming? The silence in the room deepened. Earth was now standing on the edge of a war that could consume everything. The unknowns were many, but one thing was certain: whatever was coming, humanity had better be ready. As the story unfolded, the question loomed: would Earth rise to meet this ancient challenge, or would it crumble under the weight of an unstoppable enemy? Only time would tell. The decision to act. The atmosphere at Earth Defense Command had become charged with tension. The decoded message had shaken everyone to their core, but now they had to make the most critical decision of their lives. Would Earth respond to the Zethrans' call for help, or would they dismiss it as a threat they weren't ready to face? The war room was filled with high-ranking officials from around the world. General Moore paced back and forth at the head of the table, his face grim. Lieutenant Grace Walker stood nearby, eyes fixed on the holographic map of the galaxy displayed in the center of the room. Every eye was on the Zethra coordinates, where the SOS had originated, far beyond the reaches of any human exploration. "We have two options," General Moore finally spoke, his voice steady but strained. "One, we ignore this. We treat it as a hoax or an unnecessary risk and prepare for a defensive posture here on Earth. Or two, we respond, prepare our forces, and investigate. But responding could mean war. We could be walking straight into a trap. We need to be sure." The debate that followed was heated. Some officials were quick to argue that Earth could not afford to get involved in a conflict that had nothing to do with them. After all, Earth had never encountered an enemy like this. The Zethrans were from another galaxy, and their situation seemed too far removed for Earth to intervene. "We don't even know if these aliens can be trusted," said one general from the European Defense Coalition. "This could all be a trap designed to draw us into their war." But on the other side of the room, there were those who felt the situation was much more urgent. Dr. Philip Carter, the lead scientist in the decoding effort, stood and addressed the group. "We cannot ignore this. The transmission was a clear distress signal, and it wasn't just a warning for the Zethrans. It was for us too. The Zethrans have been wiped out by a powerful enemy, and their message was clear. That same enemy is coming for us. We've seen no signs of this enemy so far, but it doesn't mean they're not out there. The moment we dismiss this, we risk everything. The room fell silent. General Moore took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing as he weighed the consequences. This wasn't just a military decision. It was one that would shape Earth's future for years to come. If they made the wrong choice, it could mean the end of humanity. Finally, he turned toward Grace, who had been quietly observing the discussion. "Lieutenant Walker, you've been at the heart of this from the beginning. What do you think? Should we respond?" Grace hesitated. It felt like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. She had spent countless hours studying the transmission, the cryptic messages, and the stories of the Zethrans. The fear in their words had been real. The enemy they described was something humanity had never encountered before. But she couldn't shake the thought that Earth had a unique advantage: its unpredictability. The Zethrans might have been technologically advanced, but humanity had always found a way to survive, to fight back against impossible odds. "We don't know what we're facing," she began, her voice calm but firm. "But we do know one thing. If we don't act now, we might never get another chance. This enemy doesn't just destroy, it erases entire civilizations. If we don't respond, Earth could be next. We may not be ready, but we have no choice. We have to act. For our future, and for the future of every civilization out there that could be facing the same threat." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, the room was silent. Then, General Moore nodded. "All right then, we'll respond. But we do it carefully. We'll send a fleet of reconnaissance ships to Zethra. We'll gather as much intel as we can and prepare for the worst. Earth's forces will begin training and gearing up. But this is a calculated move. We're not going to rush into this without knowing exactly what we're up against." The decision was made. It was risky, but it was the only choice. Earth had always been a planet of survivors, and now they would face a test unlike anything they had ever known. As the days passed, the preparations began. Military forces were put on high alert, and the best minds from around the world were brought together to figure out the most effective way to approach the unknown enemy. Grace found herself working around the clock, coordinating with military officials and scientists while trying to make sense of the little information they had. Despite the urgency, there was also a sense of disbelief. How could Earth, just a small planet on the edge of a distant galaxy, possibly be involved in an intergalactic war? For years, humans had looked up at the stars, wondering what lay beyond. Now, they were about to find out, but it came with a price. The stakes had never been higher. Meanwhile, the world watched in silence. Governments made public statements, assuring their citizens that everything was under control. But Grace knew better. The people of Earth had no idea what was coming. They only knew that something was about to change, and that no one could predict the outcome. In the heart of Earth's military headquarters, General Moore and Lieutenant Walker stood side by side, looking out over the bustling command center. The final preparations for the reconnaissance mission were underway, but there was still so much uncertainty. No one knew exactly what awaited them at Zethra. The enemy could be waiting, ready to pounce on Earth's unprepared forces. Or perhaps they were already en route, planning their next move. "We're moving into uncharted territory," Moore said quietly, his gaze fixed on the screens in front of him. "We've trained for everything we could think of, but this is beyond anything we've ever faced." Grace nodded, her mind focused on the task at hand. "We don't know what the future holds, but we know we're not going down without a fight." They exchanged a look. It was the beginning of something huge, something humanity wasn't prepared for. But the decision had been made, and now there was no turning back. With that, the first ships prepared to leave Earth's orbit, heading toward Zethra. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, was in their hands. The question remained, Would they be able to stop the hunters, or would humanity become another lost civilization in the endless void of space? Preparing for the worst. The decision had been made, and now Earth's military machine shifted into high gear. General Moore's command center became a hub of activity, with commanders from every corner of the globe working together, sharing information, and preparing for the worst. The world had just received its first true taste of the unknown, and it was a bitter one. But humanity was resilient, and they knew that survival depended on preparation. Lieutenant Grace Walker found herself at the forefront of this preparation, coordinating operations and ensuring that everything moved forward without delay. She spent hours in meetings with military strategists, scientists, and engineers, helping design the fleet that would make the long journey to Zethra. Ships, weapons, and technology had to be optimized for a battle none of them truly understood. The first part of the mission was simple: gather information. But as every day passed, the reality began to sink in. This wasn't going to be a simple reconnaissance mission. The more they learned about the Zethrans and their enemies, the more uncertain they became about their chances of success. The Zethrans had warned them about the hunters, beings capable of wiping out entire civilizations. They didn't know exactly what they looked like, what their technology entailed, or how to fight them. But one thing was certain: Earth would be tested like never before. The fleet that would make the journey to Zethra was made up of Earth's most advanced ships. The military had pulled out all the stops, creating vessels equipped with cutting-edge technology. The flagship, U.S. Guardian, was a massive, heavily armored cruiser designed to withstand the most punishing of attacks. Alongside it were smaller reconnaissance vessels, each equipped with specialized sensors and advanced AI systems that would help them analyze the alien world. There was no room for error. "We can't afford to leave any stone unturned," General Moore had said, outlining the mission's key objectives. "We need to know exactly who we're facing and what kind of power they wield. Our survival depends on it." For Grace, it was a race against time. Every hour that passed was one that brought them closer to potential disaster. She worked tirelessly with the tech teams, ensuring that the ships were outfitted with the latest defensive capabilities. It was a new kind of warfare they were preparing for, one that Earth had never seen before. Meanwhile, the world was becoming increasingly aware of the danger. Public announcements were made, and though many still didn't understand the gravity of the situation, there was a growing sense of anxiety. The Zethrans' warning had set off alarms across the planet, and governments were putting emergency plans in place. Some nations were preparing bunkers, while others focused on ensuring that civilian infrastructure would be protected if the worst came to pass. But despite the sense of preparation, there was also fear. The Earth hadn't faced an enemy like this before. Stories of the hunters wiping out entire civilizations loomed over everyone's thoughts, fueling paranoia. People didn't know whether to take refuge in shelters or prepare to fight. In the midst of all this uncertainty, the military continued to work around the clock, refining strategies and fortifying defenses. Back at Earth Defense Command, Grace stood in front of a massive screen that displayed a hologram of Zethra. The planet, now identified through the Zethran signal, was a rocky world with massive mountain ranges and an atmosphere far too thin for humans to survive without technology. In the far reaches of space, the planet had long been forgotten by most of the galaxy, its star system isolated from the rest. But now, it was the epicenter of a conflict that could change the course of history. As the fleet was being prepped, Grace's mind raced with 1,000 questions. Was the Zethran message truly what it seemed? Could they trust it, or was there something more at play? And most importantly, was Earth really ready for this? Grace spent a lot of time with the team working on the planet's atmosphere. Despite the best technology Earth had, Zethra was a place that required extreme caution. No human had ever set foot there, and they had to figure out a way to land and gather intel without drawing attention from the hunters. The team worked on building a series of advanced drones that would be able to explore the surface and gather data before any human landing occurred. The drones were designed to be undetectable to alien sensors and were equipped with the latest camouflage technology. Every step we take could bring us closer to danger, Grace thought, staring at the holographic display of the planet. The mission had so many unknowns, and the pressure to succeed was unbearable. One mistake could mean the difference between life and death. The final preparations for the journey to Zethra were soon completed. The fleet was ready, and the first wave of ships began to depart from Earth's orbit. As Grace watched the ships launch, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of uncertainty. She had spent so much time preparing, but now it was all out of her hands. They were heading into the unknown, and all they had were their instincts, their technology, and their will to survive. The journey to Zethra would take weeks, and during that time, Earth's forces would continue to prepare for what they might face. Earth's entire military was on alert, with defensive measures being deployed across the planet. No one knew if the hunters were already on their way, or if they had already arrived and were waiting for the right moment to strike. As the fleet made its way to Zethra, Grace spent the time reflecting on how far humanity had come. Just a few decades ago, they had been focused on Earth's problems, wars, politics, and resource shortages. Now they were preparing for an intergalactic war, one that could define the future of the human race. We're not alone in this fight, Grace reminded herself as the ships sped toward their destination. And we won't go down without a fight. In the weeks to come, they would face the greatest challenge humanity had ever known. The fleet was ready, but the question remained, what would they find when they reached Zethra? Would the hunters be waiting, ready to destroy everything in their path? Or had Earth's decision to answer the call been the right one? Only time would tell. The first encounter. As the fleet neared the outer boundaries of Zethra's star system, an eerie silence fell over the command center. The hum of the spacecraft's engines, once a comforting background noise, had faded into a dull thrum as they entered the unknown. Lieutenant Grace Walker stood beside General Moore, watching as the screens in front of them displayed the unknown world of Zethra. The distant planet loomed like a shadow in the cold void of space, and despite the fleet's preparation, there was an unshakable feeling of unease in the air. The first wave of reconnaissance ships, led by the U.S. Guardian, had entered Zethra's orbit without encountering any resistance. The planet's surface appeared desolate, barren, and devoid of life. It wasn't what they had expected. There were no signs of Zethran life, no cities, no activity, just mountains and a scared red landscape. Where is everyone? Grace thought as she scanned the readings. The Zethrans had sent the SOS, but now their world seemed abandoned. Send out the drones, General Moore commanded, his voice tight with tension. We need to know what's going on down there. The drones, designed with the latest camouflage technology, were released from the ships. Their small, nearly invisible shapes drifted toward the surface, scanning for any signs of movement, life, or unusual activity. For the first time since their departure from Earth, the fleet was vulnerable. Without the drones, they had no way of knowing what lurked on Zethra. As the drones descended into the atmosphere, the first reports came in. The surface was just as lifeless as it had appeared from orbit, but then, a strange reading popped up on the screen. One of the drones had detected an anomaly near the planet's largest mountain range. The reading suggested a faint energy signature, something hidden beneath the surface. The drone's sensors also picked up traces of a structure, something unnatural buried deep within the mountains. Something's down there, Dr. Carter said, his voice almost drowned out by the collective murmurs of the command center. It's not just the planet's natural resources. There's definitely something artificial, something hidden. The fleet quickly adjusted their course, heading toward the coordinates the drones had relayed. As they approached the location, the atmosphere around Zethra seemed to shift. The previously quiet, desolate world now felt like it was holding its breath. Then it happened. The first signs of hostility. Without warning, the sky around them lit up with a series of bright, blinding flashes. Energy blasts from unknown sources rained down on the fleet, striking the reconnaissance ships with terrifying precision. The U.S. Guardian shuddered as its shields absorbed the first few blows, but the impact was enough to send the entire fleet into a defensive maneuver. "All ships, evasive action," General Moore barked, his voice crackling over the communication system. Grace's heart pounded in her chest as she gripped the console. What in the hell is that? She thought, watching in disbelief as the incoming fire seemed to come from nowhere, as if the very atmosphere was attacking them. The fleet's sensors scrambled to detect the source of the blasts, but the enemy was well hidden. They had not expected the planet's surface to be so treacherous. Whoever, or whatever, was on the ground had managed to stay hidden for centuries. And now, it was clear that the hunters had prepared for an ambush. "Report," General Moore's voice demanded over the comms, his tone sharp and commanding. "We're taking damage, sir," one of the reconnaissance officers reported. "Shields are holding for now, but we can't get a clear lock on the attackers. It's like they're everywhere, but we can't see them." "Deploy countermeasures," General Moore ordered. The fleet's ships scattered, engaging defensive systems as they tried to shake off the barrage of attacks. Grace watched as several smaller reconnaissance ships began to break apart under the onslaught. The energy blasts were relentless, and it quickly became clear that this enemy had technology far beyond anything humanity had encountered. And then, as suddenly as the attacks had begun, they stopped. The fleet's systems went quiet, and for a brief moment there was nothing. Just the cold, dark void of space around them. Grace felt a knot form in her stomach. Something was wrong. The sudden silence only made the tension grow. The enemy wasn't done yet. They were just biding their time. "Stay alert," General Moore ordered, his voice calm but filled with authority. "They're testing us. They want to see how we react. Keep the fleet in formation and move in slowly." It was then that the true nature of the enemy became apparent. From the depths of Zethra's atmosphere, several massive, cloaked ships emerged, unlike anything the fleet had ever seen. They were sleek and black, almost invisible against the backdrop of the planet's harsh red terrain. These ships were not built for traditional warfare. They were designed for stealth, speed, and overwhelming firepower, and they had one singular purpose: to destroy. "They've been waiting for us," Grace whispered, her voice barely audible over the communications system. "They knew we would come. This wasn't a trap, it was a warning." The lead ship fired once more, sending a massive beam of energy toward the U.S. Guardian. The ship rocked under the impact, its shields struggling to hold. The crew inside scrambled to respond, but the damage was severe. They couldn't continue much longer without reinforcements. "We need to fall back," shouted one of the commanders over the comms. "If we don't, we'll be destroyed." General Moore gritted his teeth. "No, we push forward. We've come this far. We can't back down now." But Grace knew that the decision had to be made quickly. The first encounter with the hunters had already proven to be a brutal test of their resolve. The fleet was outmatched, outgunned, and outwitted. But there was no turning back now. They had to gather whatever intelligence they could. The fate of Earth and all of humanity depended on what they learned here. As the battle raged on, one thing became clear. The hunters were not just invaders. They were predators, and Earth had just walked right into their hunting ground. With the first deadly encounter now in the past, Grace's thoughts turned to the future. Would they survive this? Would Earth survive this? Or was this just the beginning of a war they were not ready for? The final stand. The first encounter had been a wake-up call. The hunters were not just enemies. They were predators, and they were relentless. After the brutal ambush on Zethra, Earth's fleet found themselves scrambling to regroup. The U.S. Guardian and the remaining ships were severely damaged. The hunters had tested their defenses, and now Earth's forces had no choice but to confront the inevitable, an all-out war for survival. As the fleet limped back to a safer orbit around Zethra, the crew worked tirelessly to repair and stabilize the ships. The damage was extensive, but they had no time to waste. Every second counted. The fleets had to prepare for the coming onslaught, knowing that they would soon be facing a force far more powerful than anything humanity had ever encountered. Grace stood in the command center, staring at the screens as the last of the reconnaissance ships arrived back in orbit. The data they had gathered from the first attack was invaluable. They had learned that the hunters used advanced cloaking technology and specialized weapons capable of piercing even the strongest shields. Worse still, these ships were fast, agile, and nearly impossible to track. It was clear that they were dealing with a species far beyond anything Earth had prepared for. General Moore stood beside her, watching the readouts. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with determination. "They're not going to stop," Moore said, his voice grim. "We can't keep running. If we don't face them head-on, we're not going to make it out of this. Earth won't make it." Grace nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "What's our plan, sir?" Moore turned toward the fleet's command officers. "We prepare for the final stand. We know they'll be coming for us soon. This isn't a fight we can win with sheer force alone. We need strategy, precision, and the element of surprise." He wasn't wrong. As the fleet continued to make repairs and finalize their plans, intelligence gathered from the drones and reconnaissance ships suggested that the hunters would not wait much longer. They would soon launch a full-scale attack on Earth, and Zethra was their staging ground. Earth's fleet had one chance to stop them before the hunters made their move. The military leaders made the decision to build a massive counteroffensive. They would hit the hunter ships at their most vulnerable, before they had a chance to organize and strike Earth's defense forces. Earth's fleet would be divided into two main groups, one to attack the hunters' base on Zethra, and the other to prepare a defensive line in orbit. It was a risky move, but it was the only one that offered any hope. Grace's role was clear. She would command one of the smaller ships, a specially modified vessel built for stealth operations. Her team would infiltrate the hunter fleet and disrupt their communications long enough to give the main fleet a fighting chance. They needed to create chaos, to throw the hunters off balance, so that Earth's forces could strike with maximum force. As the mission drew closer, the reality of the situation began to settle in. This wasn't just about saving Earth, it was about saving the entire galaxy. If the hunters were allowed to continue their invasion, it would be only a matter of time before Earth was completely overrun. And then nothing would stop the hunters from wiping out humanity and every other civilization they came across. The fleet assembled and prepared for the assault. The ships were patched up, their weapons and shields tested one last time. Earth's military was now as ready as they could be, but there was still a lingering fear. What if it wasn't enough? What if the hunters were too strong, too advanced? But there was no turning back. The final stand was about to begin. Grace and her team boarded the stealth vessel, the Vanguard, and slipped into the darkness of space. As they made their way toward the hunter fleet's position, the tension was palpable. Every member of the crew knew what was at stake. They had one shot at this. Failure meant the end. As the Vanguard approached the enemy lines, they used every trick they could to stay undetected. The hunter ships were formidable, but the stealth technology on the Vanguard allowed them to slip past most of their defenses. Grace held her breath as they closed in on the hunter's base, a massive orbital facility hidden among the debris of what was once a thriving world. In the distance, Grace could see the shadow of the massive hunter fleet gathering. They were preparing to launch their assault on Earth. Time was running out. Deploying disruption beacons, Grace ordered, "Let's make sure they don't see us coming." The team launched a series of specialized beacons that interfered with the hunters' communication networks. It was a risky move. If they were detected, they would be wiped out in an instant. But if they succeeded, it would create just enough confusion to give the main fleet an opening. For a few tense moments, the Vanguard was silent. Nothing happened. And then, the first sign of success. The communication network on the hunter fleet flickered. The disruption was working. The hunter ships began to move erratically, their formations breaking apart as they tried to figure out what was happening. "This is it," Grace whispered, her heart racing. "Now's our chance." Back at Earth's fleet, General Moore watched the readouts with bated breath. The enemy was disoriented, and now Earth's main forces would strike. The fleet rallied, moving into position as the stealth ships continued to create chaos within the Hunter fleet. "Fire at will," Moore shouted as Earth's ships fired their first salvo at the now vulnerable enemy ships. The battle was ferocious. The Hunters were fierce and well-coordinated, but Earth's forces fought with everything they had. Ships collided, explosions rang out in space, and the very fabric of the galaxy seemed to tremble under the weight of the battle. Grace and her team, deep within enemy territory, fought to stay hidden. They knew that the fate of the entire battle, and possibly humanity's survival, rested on their shoulders. If they could maintain the disruption long enough, Earth's fleet could push through and end this fight. But as the battle raged on, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that the true test had only just begun. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for humanity's place in the universe. Would Earth rise to the challenge, or would it be consumed by the Hunters? The final stand was more than just a battle. It was a defining moment for all of humanity, victory and reflection. The battle in space raged on, a chaotic dance of explosions, beams of energy, and scattered wreckage. The Hunter fleet, though mighty and deadly, was struggling to hold its ground. The disruption caused by Grace's stealth team had thrown them off balance, and the relentless assault from Earth's forces was starting to take its toll. The Hunters were fierce, but Earth's resolve was stronger. Every ship, every soldier, fought with everything they had, knowing that the fate of their world, and countless others, was on the line.